So Israel just began Operation Gideon's Chariots 2, with 3 full divisions moving into the Gaza Strip with a stated goal of clearing Gaza City of Hamas. The Israeli defense minister, speaking to this operation, said, quote, "Gaza is burning." Meanwhile, a sitting U.S. senator just a few moments ago said that Israeli operations in Gaza are ethnic cleansing, which I believe makes him the most senior U.S. official to make that statement since the war began. We will play that full video here in a moment, but we're going to start with what we know in terms of operations on the ground. The IDF put out a couple statements here saying, quote, "In the past day, IDF troops in the Southern Command from the 98th, 162nd, and 36th Divisions have begun expanded ground operations in Gaza City as a part of Operation Gideon's Chariots 2. The Gaza Division is operating in the security zone along the border facing the western Negev communities and operating in the Rafah and Han Yunis areas, while the 99th Division is operating in the northern Gaza Strip. In the past week, and this is leading up to current operations, they say the Israeli Air Force struck more than 850 terror targets and hundreds of terrorists in Gaza City in order to degrade Hamas terrorist infrastructure and to prepare the area for the deployment of troops. Leading up to this as well, we did see Israel announce and then carry through on the destruction of multiple high-rise buildings that they say were being used by Hamas to observe Israeli troop movements, plan, and carry out attacks against the IDF. Now, the Chief of the General Staff, Lieutenant General Zamir, put out a statement speaking to the troops saying, quote, "Yesterday, we expanded the ground operation into the center of Gaza City, which constitutes a vital area for Hamas. The mission rests on your shoulders to decisively defeat the Gaza City Brigade. The maneuver in Gaza City is a significant step to carry out our highest moral and important duty, to return all of the hostages home and to dismantle the military and governing capabilities of the Hamas terror organization. The threat has changed, but so have we. We've come better prepared. This is a move of decisive importance for the continuation of the war." Now, we haven't seen any new footage put out by Hamas in recent days or even claims of significant attacks being carried out by Hamas or Palestinian Islamic Jihad against the IDF, but I would expect to see that in the coming days. This is going to be, we've gone quite a while now without significant ground operations, direct contact engagements, and that's what Gaza City is really shaping up for. There's a lot of areas there where the IDF either has not been or has had a very limited presence since October 7th. So moving into some of those areas, they have to expect a pretty significant Hamas defense, and in some areas, a well-armed Hamas ready to take them on. Defense Minister Katz said, quote, "Gaza is burning. The IDF strikes with an iron fist at the terrorist infrastructure, and IDF soldiers are fighting bravely to create the conditions for the release of the hostages and the defeat of Hamas. We will not relent and we will not go back until the completion of the mission." We have a little bit more here from the IDF, but I'm going to insert a personal opinion here. I'm not entirely, and I don't think this should come as a shock at this point. It doesn't seem like there is a military solution right now to get the hostages back. And this isn't some new revelation that I just woke up this morning and went, oh man, I don't think that's going to work. I think anybody following this conflict and a lot of folks in Israel, I see a lot of feedback and a lot of emails and wonderful notes from people much closer to this conflict than I. It's hard to see at this point how there is a military solution to the return of the hostages. Just, to fully eliminate everyone in Hamas, you're going to have to eliminate some of those people that are guarding the hostages and they're holed up right next to them. At which point we have already seen Hamas has executed the hostages when Israeli forces get close, lest they risk there actually being a successful rescue operation. So it's very hard to think of this. I think you can have one or the other at this point. And I understand that is a serious debate inside of Israel right now, is there are people pushing back saying that the hostages are not being prioritized. And I can understand that. And I think it's been that way for quite a while. Just outside looking in, it's not increased firepower. It's not a few more airstrikes. It's not a few more ground raids that will lead at this point to a rescue operation. That's not to say we're never going to see that again, right? The Israeli military and security apparatus is incredible in what they're able to pull off. It's not out of the question that that is still in the cards somewhere, but that right now it's very hard to look at that and say that there's a military solution to the successful, safe return of all remaining living hostages. The IDF spokesperson, Brigadier General Defrin, put out a statement saying, quote, "Gaza City is the central hub of Hamas's military and governing power, their main stronghold. Hamas has turned Gaza City into the largest human shield in history, And that's going to be important. That's something President Trump spoke to just before this operation kicked off. He says, beneath the streets runs a vast network of tunnels connecting command centers, rocket launchers, and weapon storage facilities, all deliberately hidden under civilians and civilian infrastructure. We continue to urge civilians to distance themselves away from the combat zones in Gaza City so they can reach safer areas. We've seen a lot of footage in recent days of migration within the Gaza Strip. A lot of Gazans moving from Gaza City, mostly south from what I've seen, but evacuating as best they can. There have also been some audio clips released of Palestinians talking to the IDF saying, we are trying to go, but Hamas is putting up roadblocks and not allowing us to leave or pushing us back in. We've seen that before. That also should not come as a major shock. One of the benefits of an insurgency, an organization like Hamas in this case, or Islamic State throughout much of the world, is they rely on the proximity to civilians to make it harder for their enemy to conduct successful operations. So the idea that Hamas would want more civilians in Gaza City, of course, we have seen that from day one, and we're still seeing that now. Defrin says, quote, in recent weeks, the IDF expanded humanitarian efforts in Gaza, setting up humanitarian areas in the south. The area provides greater access to food, water, medical care, and shelter. And while Israel works to open corridors for civilians to move south, such as the Rashid corridor, Hamas is actively trying to block them, forcing families to turn back and remain in harm's way in order to shield Hamas fighters and preserve its power. So a lot of people there that are going to be in a really tough spot, right? What do? You don't want to sit and wait after a city has been ordered to be evacuated ahead of an Israeli offensive. You don't want to defy that and just sit around and hope that you don't get caught in the crossfire. Meanwhile, it's how are you going to stand up to Hamas if you're out there on your own? There's going to be a lot of people stuck in the middle there. They say Hamas continues to hold dozens of our hostages in inhumane conditions. Their safe return is the forefront of our mission. They are the reason we continue to fight. Our forces are acting with determination, guided by the clear moral duty to free our hostages and end Hamas's rule of terror. Now, we do have a statement here from Hamas in a moment directly responding to a comment made by President Trump, but I do want to turn to some Al Jazeera reporting, providing that perspective on how things are playing out. They say Israel has bombed and destroyed the tallest residential building in Gaza, the Al Ghafri high-rise, as it launched a massive wave of strikes on Gaza City Monday evening, forcing hundreds of thousands of residents to continue to flee the city. Hundreds of thousands of residents in Gaza City alone seems steep. Maybe. It's hard to calculate that at this point because there's been so much displacement throughout the Gaza Strip. But if you're talking around 2 million people total, a couple 100,000 still remaining in Gaza City seems like an awful lot. Either way, there's a lot of people there, no doubt. They say Israeli media source Channel 12 reported that exceptionally intense airstrikes were concentrated in the city's north and west, while the Palestinian civil defense said at least 50 multi-story buildings had been leveled in recent weeks as Israeli forces intensified attacks to seize the city. Other neighborhoods have been reduced to rubble. In Zaytun, more than 1,500 homes and buildings have been destroyed since early August, leaving entire city blocks with nothing left standing. Now, I mentioned the timing of a statement from President Trump, which he said, hey, this is your last chance, essentially, to Hamas. And I can understand how Hamas or anyone else hears that and goes, there's been one case so far where President Trump has essentially issued a warning and then at that exact time when it comes to foreign affairs, international relations, and military stuff. Right? With Iran, he gave 60 days, and on the 61st day, we saw U.S. military action against their nuclear facilities. There have been multiple last chances given to Hamas, so it's understandable why they might brush this aside. But on September 15th, President Trump, so Monday, President Trump stated, quote, I read a news report that Hamas moved the hostages above ground to use them as human shields against Israel's ground offensive. I hope the leaders of Hamas know that what they're getting into if they do such a thing. This is a human atrocity, the likes of which few have seen. Don't let this happen or else all bets are off. Release all of the hostages now. Shortly after this post was sent out, the Israeli ground offensive began, not suggesting there was necessarily timing, like waiting for President Trump to say that or not, but just notable, Israel was rearing to go when President Trump made that statement. Hamas responded to President Trump saying, quote, Trump's statements regarding the terrorist attack by the occupation army on the city of Gaza and the situation of the Zionist prisoners are a blatant bias in favor of Zionist propaganda and constitute double standards because they ignore the ethnic cleansing and the killing of 65,000 Gazans. Again, as mentioned previously, we're not getting a lot of information from Hamas at this point. I would expect to see an increase in some of their footage, some of their statements here in coming days as combat intensifies in Gaza City. Now, amidst all of this, as I was putting this video together, something popped up on my feed. We have Senator Van Hollen just back from a trip to Israel, who lays out pretty clearly here. He says, based off what I've seen, Israel is committing ethnic cleansing. And I believe this is the most senior current U.S. official to make this this sort of claim. Let's go ahead and play that full video here. I think it's 3 minutes in length. Here we go.
The Netanyahu government is engaged in a campaign of ethnic cleansing in Gaza. Senator Jeff Merkley and I just recently returned from a week-long trip to the Middle East. We visited Israel, the West Bank, Jordan, and Egypt. And we focused on lots of issues, but the main area of focus was on the absolute humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza. We came away with one inescapable conclusion, and that is that the Netanyahu government is engaged in a campaign of ethnic cleansing in Gaza. Now, both of us fully believe that Israel had a right and a duty to defend itself and its people after the horrific Hamas terror attack of October 7th. But it's very clear that the Netanyahu government has gone way beyond targeting Hamas to imposing collective punishment on the people of Gaza.
We're here on the Egyptian side of the Rafah Gate, looking over into Gaza, and it has been absolutely leveled. It is just a pile of rubble.
If you look at the numbers put forward by international organizations, you'll see that they estimate 90% of the homes in Gaza have been destroyed or severely damaged. Part of the Netanyahu government strategy has been to use food as a weapon of war. And what we saw very clearly was that the Netanyahu government was raising obstacles to the delivery of that food. We went to the Israeli port of Ashdod that the World Food Program uses to offload food destined to help starving people in Gaza. But because of the unnecessary restrictions imposed by the government of Israel, only a very small share of food that could be delivered immediately actually gets through.
The folks who need the food the most are, of course, kids and the vulnerable, and they're not getting it. They're just not getting this food at all.
We began our trip with our first public meeting being with families of hostages. And to a person, the ones we met with said that Prime Minister Netanyahu has prioritized his political survival over the survival of their loved ones. And so we come back here after our trip really to sound the alarm and say America should not be party to a campaign of ethnic cleansing. It's both immoral and it's flat out illegal. Let's end it and bring the hostages home.
All right, so again, I think that is probably the most senior U.S. official to push back in that meaningful of a way and label these actions as a war crime. I just don't know that we've seen that from a U.S. senator, certainly nobody in the White House anytime recently. So we'll see. I don't know if that's going to get much attention. I don't know if anything is going to come of it, but nonetheless, pretty notable statement that was just made a few hours ago. Now, while all the focus is on Gaza, we do still have Israel and the Houthis going back and forth, and Israel carried out another strike just a couple days ago against the port of Hodeidah in Yemen. And the way this played out was kind of interesting. So Israel issued a statement at 6:33 CDT, so Central Time here where I'm located. The exact time doesn't, it's the time difference between these two that matters, but the IDF Arabic spokesperson put out a public notice saying, urgent warning to everyone present at the port of Hodeidah in Yemen. The army will attack in the coming hours in the area specified on the map in light of the military activities carried out by the terrorist Houthi regime. For your safety, we urge all of those present at the port of Hodeidah and the ships anchored there to evacuate the area immediately. Anyone who remains in that area puts their life in danger. And about, 2 hours later, so 8:29 CDT, so just under 2 hours later, we got confirmation from sources in Yemen and started publicly posting that things were going boom near the port. So it looks like in that particular case, Israel and the IDF gave the Houthis 2 hours of warning and then carried out a strike against Houthi infrastructure. The IDF statement said, quote, they struck a military infrastructure belonging to the Houthi terrorist regime at the Hodeidah port in Yemen. The strike was carried out in response to the repeated attacks by the Houthis against the state of Israel, including UAVs and surface-to-surface missiles. The IDF will continue to act with strength against these repeated attacks. The Houthis, for their part, did mention during the course of these strikes that their air defenses had become active. Does not appear that it was... We didn't see anything get shot down, didn't see any detonations. Following the attack, the Houthis said, quote, the air defenses caused great confusion for the enemy aircraft and forced some of their combat formations to leave the airspace before carrying out their aggression, and the penetration into the depth was thwarted, thanks to God. We don't really have anything to verify that at all other than the Houthi statement. I should mention that since that Israeli strike, I think it was just yesterday, the Houthis launched another, what they say were 2 hypersonic ballistic missiles at Israel. Israel confirmed one interception. It sounds like the other missile maybe didn't quite make it to Israeli airspace or close enough to need to be intercepted. But either way, while Israel is pushing into Gaza City, what is set to be probably a pretty significant fight, they're still dealing with the Houthis down in Yemen. So it's going to be worth keeping an eye on both of those situations going forward. But that's all we got for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.